Today I will be playing in the weekly $400 tournament doing cheeses only, but there's a twist. This tournament is normally already fully stacked with pro gamers, but now it is no longer locked to the European server, which means there will be a lot of pro Korean players in attendance as well. My specific challenge for today is to do a proxy every game. Fake proxies are also allowed. Let's begin. First game of the tournament is going to be against Gunner. Now in this tournament every series is going to be a best of 3 besides the finals, which is a best of 5. Now, I think so far, we have only reached the finals once since we started doing challenges, which definitely has to be the highlight of the entire series, by the way, because that was freaking awesome. But today, the setting is that we are going to be doing proxies and fake proxies only. Now, the reason why I'm including fake proxies is just because it gives me a little bit more space to mind game. I want a proxy no matter what to keep it cheesy, but the fake proxy is just going to add a little bit of a layer of depth where I can... Like, something that happens a lot in these tournaments is that the higher seeded players, who I'm usually going to be facing in round 2 and 3 and stuff, they will be watching my games of the previous rounds because they finish their games very fast. They'll see that I'm proxying every game, and then they'll just be able to blind counter me absolutely brutally, and I want to try and prevent that, as well as adding a lot of fun because of the fake proxies. Because fake proxy, I mean, you're going to see it in this game. This game is going to be so much freaking fun just because of how ridiculous my build is. Now, my opponent here is going to be Gunner. He is a 5.5k MMR mid-Grandmaster Protoss. That is actually a very strong opponent for the first round. Keep in mind that since I don't compete in the circuit anymore, I also don't have seeding points, so my seed is also going to be garbage, so it's going to be quite rough from the start here. Now, for this particular game, I was inspired by a tournament that I played a very long time ago. I want to say that it was in 2020. No, I mean, sometimes I talk about builds I did in 2012, so I guess, you know, comparatively, it's not that long ago, but it was a couple of years ago for sure. And I had one of those moments where I was just in a little bit of a rut when it came to TVP. I just wasn't winning any games in TVP, and, you know, every time I practiced, I was just losing, and I was very, very demotivated. So I played this qualifier for, I think it was Home Story Cup or Stay at Home Story Cup, not quite sure. And I was literally just doing whatever. Like, I didn't even think my strategy through or anything like that. I just decided to proxy somewhere on the map and build the most random stuff I could imagine. So what I did is I pretty much like this. I built a barracks in a random spot, a factory in a random spot, and a starport in a random spot. And I just built something. Like, I didn't even care what it was. I think in the end, I ended up having, like, Marauder, Hellion, Tank, Viking, or something ridiculous. And somehow it actually kind of worked. Just because the opponents, they get so confused. That's one of the things about StarCraft, and even more so about top pro players, right? Is that they really rely on the meta in some way. So, whenever you play outside of the meta, it's just a whole different way of playing, because normally you don't have to actively think about the game that much. Like, I know it sounds crazy because, you know, it's a strategy game and it's, you know, obviously requires a decent amount of brain power, but for the most part, the best way to play StarCraft is just to already know what you would do in certain situations. Like, if you have to figure it out while you're playing, things are just gonna go south. So all these pros, they pretty much know the response to, like, every single build. They might not know it for 100%, but they know for, you know, a pretty decent percentage what they're gonna do, or at least what they want to do. And then when your opponent plays something completely ridiculous, that all goes out the window, and they suddenly need to start actively thinking about the game. They'll ruin their build a little bit, maybe even their mechanics. That's definitely less likely at this high of a level, but maybe even their mechanics, but definitely their build. And they can always start playing a little more scared, which is one of the best things you can have going for you. I always thought so in tournaments. The best thing you can have is your opponent just being scared of you, because they'll play so much worse. They'll, you know, be overly safe when they clearly don't have to. Now, obviously, after me going for this early game, my opponent going for a proxy gate there, this is already a good example, by the way. Like, he went for a proxy gate because he thought it was going to be a regular proxy reaper, and then I just have freaking Marauders building next to a proxy gate with a Cyclone and killing it, right? So that is such an annoying freaking start for him. I was sure he was already a little bit rattled here. And me being me, obviously I didn't go for a normal follow-up here. Behind this, I'm taking a base at the gold in the corner, as well as going for a double starport follow-up, which is, yeah, I didn't exactly know where I wanted to go with it, but it was just the vibe of the moment. I think my initial idea was just to go for a lot of Banshees, annoy the hell of my opponent. And since my opponent went for a techless proxy earlier, that means that he is very unlikely to have Blink already. Like, normally you would never want to be here on the map because your opponent might have Blink. At least thing is that many Stalkers, right? Well, against most things now I think about it, you also wouldn't want to be here against Stargate, but against that many Stalkers in particular, because Blink would just absolutely ruin you. But I'm just trying to keep some pressure on. I don't want him to know anything. Keep in mind, this entire thing is just a massive freaking mind game. I never want him to find out how early I took that gold base. Like, for a while here, his economy was actually better than mine, despite failing a proxy gate, because I did not really have anything behind it, right? Like, I have a gold base, and I just walked my SCVs there for a good 30 seconds just to try and mine from the base. So my economy was absolutely in the gutter. And now we are in a pretty much opposite position. My army is, pretty much completely dead here. I might kill another Stalker, but besides that, it's gonna die for pretty much free, right? But I did kill his economy. I disturbed his mining first of all, but I also targeted down a lot of probes. I think there were only, I want to say, about 5 probes left that were going to mine from that natural. So his economy is absolutely terrible. My economy is actually surprisingly decent because I have 7 workers on the gold there, as well as 6 on the gas, or 12 in gas in total, combined with my main base. And now what I decided to do was try to play my advantage the right way. Well, it's an advantage in some way, right? Because his army is way bigger than mine. I would never be able to kill his army straight on. He probably has about 10 units that shoot up. My army is 2 Banshees. But he does have a slow economy, and I have Banshees that can harass. So I'm going to be able to kill even more probes, and I'm taking a base in the corner behind it. So if he kills my main base completely, I will still have 2 bases behind it. And since he might not have detection on the front, I could even defend this attack with my Banshees. And that's why I did really like having the Banshees. At this point, I was considering that maybe I should have made a single tank at some point and just siege it on top of my main ramp. Though, I'm not quite sure if that was the right idea now I think about it more. Because let's say the Prism just carries 4 Stalkers on top of the tank. The tank is going to die without doing anything. And maybe that would have delayed my cloak upgrade. So in the end, I did probably play it the right way, which sounds pretty ridiculous to say about going for 3 base, including 2 hidden ones with 2 starport Banshee. Really doesn't sound like a strategy you would normally recommend in any kind of competitive scenario, but I mean, here we are. Now at this point, my opponent is probably thinking he is in a decent spot. Like, he knows that I have 6 Banshees, at least if he assumes that, all of those Banshees were ones that I recently made, and the 2 that I was harassing him with are still out on the map. He should know I have 6 Banshees. But he doesn't see a command center, and I can't even really take it, because that Warp Prism, guys, keep in mind, Banshees shoot a pretty slow projectile. That Warp Prism can micro against my Banshees forever. Right now, I think he's doing it with just 1 Stalker or maybe 2, but if that was 4, that could actually be incredibly painful. But for now, I need to keep my units at home. I remember at this moment, you see me attacking my Starport, I was actually a little bit upset because I started a Viking, but I didn't realize that I started it on a Starport that already had a Banshee queued. So at this point, I was already expecting to have been able to shove that Warp Prism away, but instead I saw another Banshee finish. I was like, freaking Starport, where's my Viking, Now you could tell that this is a pretty difficult situation, and what I was telling about before, that it's unlikely that at this level the macro slips up. Look at my own macro, because my build is so freaking ridiculous, combined with this Stalker harassing me, that I kind of lost my mojo a little bit, that I just didn't really know what to spend my money on anymore. Like, having mass starport units is typically not very efficient for the ratio of resources, right? Like, I have all these minerals that I can't spend. All I can spend them on is command centers, which is pretty good. But if you think about it, my economy is already quite strong, and if I make command centers, will I even be able to defend them? I'm not quite sure. Now here, I already have 5 starports. At this point, I would say the situation is still slightly sketch. Just because I don't have any good defenses. All my bases could pretty easily be taken down if he has Blink or just warps a couple more units with that Warp Prism, right? Now with that Viking, I'm going to be able to shut that down earlier. And now he also gets Phoenixes. If you guys have never made Banshees with speed before, let me just explain you quickly what it's like. Having Banshees with speed is a freaking delight, because they are such harassing demons. Like, they are so fast and so hard to counter until your opponent gets a fast air unit out, which in most cases is going to be either Phoenixes or Mutalisk. Terran doesn't really have a fast air unit like that, but Vikings with the long range are going to be good enough. But in particular, Phoenixes and Mutalisk can just hunt them down forever, and then all of a sudden they seem quite useless. So for now, or until now, I was really happy with my Banshees. I was just planning on making 1 million of them, but then I saw the Phoenix coming out, and that's going to make this all a lot harder. I brought my Viking along that I think already killed the War Prism. Yeah, it does have 1 kill. But sadly, he had 2 Phoenixes for me. So I decided to sack the Viking so I'd be able to do some more damage with my Banshees. Now I saw on the minimap that he moved his Phoenixes back across. Just in case you guys don't know, if you have a little interaction on the map and your unit dies, you keep vision for like 2 more seconds or so. So if you want to make a mind game, you can use those 2 seconds of vision that your opponent has to move your unit somewhere, and then after 2 seconds move them back in another direction, because your opponent will have lost that vision by then. Now at this point I'm making 5 battlecruisers at once and I have 1,000,000 bases. What I think here is that I just need to buy time, because if the battlecruisers finishes, we're just going to be absolutely golden. Like, literally look at this, right? At some point, maybe like 1 minute ago, 2 minutes ago, the situation was a little sketch. You know, our army was very small and it wasn't looking that good. And now all of a sudden, we are making like freaking 7 bases and making 5 port battlecruiser. Like, that's how fast you can escalate a game. And this is the annoying thing for my opponent. If you guys didn't notice, battlecruisers are inhumanly strong against Phoenixes, because Phoenixes have 2 shots similar to the Banshee, but battlecruisers have 3 armor. So anything that has a high armor count will always counter those units like Banshees and Phoenixes, or any unit that has, even Reapers by the way, any unit that shoots 2 different attacks, basically 2 projectiles, or like the Reaper, 2 different hands that shoot, or however you want to see it. Units with armor are going to be insanely good. So my opponent spent a lot of money making 2 Stargate Phoenixes. I think he had 6 or 7 Phoenixes or so, just so he could counter the Banshees. But then I sacrificed the Banshees to kill all of the sentries and some workers, and now I make battlecruisers which counter the Phoenixes entirely. At the same time, this is a freaking hilarious moment by the way, he moved away the pros from his natural to save them from the BCs. And at this point, it doesn't seem like he was aware at all of how much eco I had. I think he thought I only had 2 bases, right? The one on the top right and my main base. And then he finds that I'm making a planetary at his freaking 4th base. I think his heart probably sank. He either thought that was like a 3rd base or a 4th base and I was trolling him, or that I have literally the entire map. Now, I don't have literally the entire map, but it's pretty freaking close. At this point, I think I'm on 7 or 8 bases or so, and my opponent is now effectively mining from 1 base because his probes from his natural ran to the middle of the map. They're probably making a freaking campfire or something, trying to survive, and there's 1,000,000 battlecruisers in his base. I have 175 supply. And this game, it was just freaking beautiful. Like, you could tell how his mind exploded. He had no idea what was going on. At this point, I have so many BCs. I do an illegal move. I teleport on top of his army, and that's going to be the first game of the tournament. Unfortunately, the second game of this series wasn't quite so epic. I freestyled even more than usual, and I tried to do a planetary fortress rush while also proxying an extra barracks for Marauders, just to find out that with this build, I literally don't even have enough units to kill a single unit under a battery. The unfortunate side effect of being an absolute psychotic StarCraft 2 player. The score is now 1-1. The final game of the series is going to be on Oceanborn, and I was left a little disappointed after the last game, because you guys know I really love my planetary rushes. And I wonder if you guys can guess what's going to happen next. Probably you will, knowing me. I'm gonna planetary rush again, because honestly, I feel like planetary rush is a bit of an underrated strategy. I know it's not necessarily the best build ever. Like, obviously, if you're gonna do it against the actual best players in the world, it's not gonna be that strong. But for the most part, it is a surprisingly strong strategy. And especially since I don't really play meta builds anymore and I just do weird memes and builds and stuff, this might be one of my stronger builds. And I honestly wanted to prove it. Like, after failing a planetary rush that bad, I was like, okay, first of all, I want to prove myself. Second of all, this guy is probably never going to expect me to do it again after such a massive failure where I literally did not kill a single one of his units. But here I am. I am me. I'm a little psychotic. And yeah, that's what we're going to do. So the idea that I had was to go for Cyclones this time. One of the reasons why the Planetary Rush is not as strong as it was when I was doing my Planetary Rush to Grandmaster series is because the Cyclone got nerfed a bit. So the Cyclone used to be very strong with it. The lock-on had a longer range. So you were pretty much guaranteed to do a non-stop decent amount of damage throughout the entire planetary rush with the Cyclone, right? Because they wouldn't be able to chase you all the way. They had to focus the planetary down, and then it just really depended on them whether they had enough damage to focus the PF down, or maybe if they went for Phoenixes so they can actually immobilize your Cyclone, stuff like that, right? But they changed the Cyclone. It has shorter range, which means that now every time you go in for the lock-on, a couple Stalkers can hit you, and it also dies very fast, meaning that even a couple Stalkers will be able to ruin your Cyclones, especially under a battery. The damage of a Cyclone is not that high anymore, so one battery will survive for a very long time. Now, what I saw in the last game for my opponent is this is something that you can usually use to your advantage. If an opponent absolutely owns you with a certain strategy, certain build, certain unit set, you name it, they are very likely to repeat that. So what my opponent beat me with was going for a Stargate with a lot of Adepts. Now, Adepts are really, really good against Marines, also against Hellions. Well, against Hellions is a relatively even trade, but they do pretty well, but especially good against Marines. And that's what I was building in the last game, right? So this game, I decided to go for Cyclones because Cyclones are quite good against Adepts. If there's one unit in the early game the Cyclone is good against, it's going to be the Adept. Now, a Void Ray, if my opponent were to go for a Stargate again, similar to what he built in game number 2, that would be a little bit of a problem. Void Rays are extremely good against Cyclone. But what I was thinking is, if I go for the fastest possible Reactor Cyclone, which is what I'm doing here, I should be able to get, well, 2 Cyclones at least, but definitely 4 Cyclones up pretty fast. If I'm looking at the timing of the Command Center, my 3rd and 4th Cyclone are going to arrive somewhat after my Command Center lands in his face, in an ideal situation, of course. And if it's just one Void Ray, I should be able to do enough damage, or at least pull his Void Ray off from the Command Center enough so the Planetary can finish. So I think we have a pretty good strategy here if my opponent goes for the Stargate. I also tried a strategy at some point against Blink, and it did work because, I swear, when I do planetary rushes, I just have some kind of plot armor for the most part, especially on stream. Like, it works so often when it shouldn't. So it worked, but it looked a little tough. But against Stargate, I feel like we should have a pretty good shot here. So I have 2 Marines and 2 Cyclones. There's probably going to be a battery. And my opponent went for an Oracle instead of a Void Ray. But he did indeed go for a very similar playstyle, going for the Stargate with the Adepts. Now, what I need to be careful for here is that my lock-ons are not going to be in cooldown when I'm in range of the Oracle, because that means the Oracle would be able to dive in. Barely couldn't land at Command Center. Here we go. His Oracle goes in now, but my next Cyclone arrived, and he is obviously in a rush to try and deal with this. That Oracle barely doesn't die. But here's the thing, guys. This Planetary should now be unstoppable. He keeps having to move his units back to block it. And that gives my Cyclone the opportunity to drain all of the battery's energy, do a lot of damage, and now he's gonna have to forfeit this base, and this is gonna put us in a very comfortable spot. This is actually the pretty much golden standard of the PF rushes, not necessarily the Cyclones, but this is kind of what tends to happen most of the time, where at some point you break through, then they have to give up their natural, and then you're kind of left in a 1 base versus 1 base scenario. The only difference from a normal 1 base versus 1 base scenario being that you have a Planetary in front of his face, which is probably going to deny his expansion forever. Like, can you imagine the things they need to break out of a Planetary being in front of their base? This is actually the situation I'm the most comfortable with. Like, notice how I'm already expanding back at home. Do have to be afraid for the Oracles coming back to haunt me, or at least my SCVs, right? I don't think I would lose all of them, but I could definitely lose a good couple of them if I wasn't defending, so I got the turret back at home. Even getting a turret next to this Planetary Fortress, and that means my opponent's gonna be detained forever. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that my opponent does have infinitely more workers than me. Keep in mind he had a pretty well saturated natural base, which I didn't. It's just the thing that he can't use them to mine. I think at this point he probably has 35 workers, and I'm going to have like 26 or something. But he can't use them to mine, so the economy right now is actually going to be slightly in our favor, because we have 1 base economy, including 1 mule, and he doesn't have the mule. Now, this I thought was a really cool move. I even got a sensor tower up in front of his base, so I could literally see his every move. I'm going to be able to see when... I don't think I've ever done this before, but this is so freaking cool, actually, in the Contain. I should really be doing this more often. I can see exactly... Look at that move. I can see exactly how he's going to posture his units. I saw those Voiders coming a mile away, because I can just see everything with the sensor tower. I would see it if he drops units on the low ground with a War Prism, blinks his Stalkers out, potentially. He's not going to have that now. And yeah, I mean, this is just my absolute bread and butter. Like, I freaking love this situation. This is my essence. This is how I play StarCraft right here. It's just so freaking beautiful. Now, what I need to do is basically just figure out a composition that I can clean this game up with while having an advantage. Because my production is definitely very awkward, right? Like, I don't have any stim going on. I don't think I even have a starport yet or anything like that. I really just have one reactor factory making cyclones, and cyclones are not going to be that great against void rays and immortals, right? Now, this planetary is going to stay for a long time. I'm just going to keep rebuilding the turrets. I was actually surprised to see him build more void rays after seeing my turrets go down. Like, turrets have an incredible amount of DPS, by the way. Like, turret anti-air is freaking crazy. And I'm not quite sure if you guys noticed, but I also got the turret range upgrade from the engineering bay. I think it is about to finish. Now, that turret I can't save from the immortal fire, but that's okay. I'll just keep making more behind it, especially with the turret range. It's going to be better and better for me. Second factory is about to finish, which is going to allow me to get either tanks or cyclone speed, which are both going to be very, very useful. And my opponent needs to find a solution to this planetary now. Like, I think what he wants to do is probably try and break this with a couple of immortals, but I feel like that's just going to be too inefficient because he needs to use his void rays for it too, right? Void rays are going to add that DPS. I think with just immortals it's going to be a little bit too annoying for him to do that. But if he uses his void rays, they are extremely likely to all die. Like, turret fire plus cyclone fire probably means all the void rays are gonna die, and if he trades that inefficiently, I don't think there's a way he can possibly win this game anymore. Now, I'm not quite sure if you guys noticed, but on the minimap I could see my sensor tower spot his void rays moving out as well. So I'm gonna go for another turret here. Keep in mind, I am gonna have turret range for those, so the turrets are gonna be extremely valuable. I'm gonna keep these cyclones here just in case he tries to bust out. I've also been mining from his natural from a long distance. You guys might question my planetary placement, by the way. Like, maybe you think I should have taken the actual natural base instead, but I feel like this position just covers the ramp a little better. If I don't have the ramp perfectly covered, I felt like it could have been a little awkward. So there we go. That turret is going to guarantee me one void ray kill right away. Might lose. You can tell how much damage Void Rays do against the Cyclones, by the way. Like, it's pretty freaking brutal. That's why you need the turrets. The Cyclones alone really don't do the trick. But here we go. I'm going to be able to defend this with my next Warpins. And this, look at that turret range, by the way. He never expected a turret hit so far, because who the hell gets freaking turret range this early in the game? He's now going to lose this Void Ray as well, probably because he was trying to get ready for his attack. Or maybe he was trying to recall. Here I'm going to see his Warp Prism move out. Sadly for me, he responded in time, so I'm not going to be able to kill those. But I think even with 4 or 5 Immortals, he's going to have an incredibly hard time killing this base. And maybe if he did, let's say he trades his entire army for that, then I'm still going to be on 2 bases. I'm going to be able to go up to 5 factories, and it's going to be very painful. Even killing some of these SCVs is really not going to be that bad. At this point, this might have been a little bit too much, but I decided to even go for the next command center so I could get a double planetary. That turret with an incredible amount of range actually gets the Warp Prism down, which means these Immortals are now stuck. He's going to have to walk the rest of his units through the planetary. But my Cyclones, even though they're not that good against Immortals, I have about 10 Cyclones here against 2 Immortals, which means that I can get lock-ons and run away from the Immortals without losing all of the Cyclones. There we go. Those are going to die as well. And that is the first series of the tournament going to our pocket. The next opponent is going to be a Korean pro player called Ryung. Let's do it. Now, this match is once again going to be a best of 3, and the first game will be on Oceanborn. Now, playing against Ryung with challenges is going to be very epic, because in case you guys don't know, first of all, Ryung is a super old school Korean pro. I think he was in the semifinals of the GSL, the biggest Korean league, as early as 2012. So yeah, he's been around for quite a while. And besides that, something very important for this match is that he's particularly amazing at TVT. He has always been a TVT sniper, even back in Wings of Liberty, but these days he still is. I think these last 2 years or so, Ryung is mostly known for his amazing rivalry with Clem. Clem being one of the best Terrans in the world, the current world champion, current best Terran player. And Ryung goes 50-50 with him and sometimes even wins a super important match against him, in particular in the World Team League. His team was able to win a whole World Team League season just because of his prowess against Clem. So this is going to be a very cool match. Now, for the first game, I decided to go for the fake proxy. And this game, I was pretty much inspired by... If you guys watch my stream or the second channel a lot, you might have seen this game a while ago. I played against a guy on the ladder called Kyrgios who did a very psychotic build, which was... He built everything at home, by the way. He didn't proxy this stuff, but I wanted to enhance his build a little bit with a little bit of craziness. But he went for Marauders plus Cyclones from home. And... the build seemed a little absurd to me, but the more I thought about it, it actually seemed kind of good. So what I was thinking is maybe I could go for that build, but with the barracks proxied. I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to proxy it next to his base or close to my base right away. Now, the problem with going for Marauders is that you cannot really defend the Reaper jumping up in your main base. Like, if you proxy the Marauder, if you do like a classic proxy Marauder build, for example, the Reaper very often just goes right into your main base and it can be hard to defend. You usually lose a couple SCVs to it. So I decided to proxy it here, which is close enough that I can maybe defend or scare his units away. In this case, he's even going to scout me. I guess he realized by the timing of the factory that I couldn't have sent my SCV out that early. Yeah, these Terrans are very freaking good at reading timings. And this opened me up for a really cool play for the rest of the series, because now he saw that I was making Marauders with Concussive Shell. I mean, all he saw was a barracks producing as well as the Tech Lab spinning, which could have been anything, but what else was I gonna make? Reapers with Stim or Reapers with Combat Shield? Yes, absolutely nothing else that it really could have been. So I decided to test the mind game aspect of this build already. So I'm gonna go for one Cyclone here, and then I'm just gonna expand behind it. And in the end, I think this might be even an advantageous situation for us. Like, if he's gonna be scared of the Marauder, which he should, he might overreact a little bit. Like, let's say he builds his command center on the high ground instead, or maybe he went for a couple more Marines than he should. I can easily just go for a third command center as well, because early game TVT, you don't really need much more than just a Cyclone drop. I mean, that is pretty much how the people play these days, right? Like, you go for a Cyclone drop early, then I usually go for air control with tanks and Marines. These days, a lot of Terran players tend to go for just medevacs with Marines and do a lot of drops and stuff together with the tanks, of course. But I wanted to play a little funny. You know, this entire episode is meant to be cheesy, so I'm not going to play the standard bio. What I'm going to do this game is I'm going to go for a very cool mech transition with some early pushes that could be very, very powerful still. Now, the first part was me going for a Cyclone drop here. Cyclone drops, in my opinion, are just the best thing you can open with, really. They're amazing offensively, they're amazing defensively. Like, think about this. If you are the one getting Cyclone dropped, I don't think there's a better defense than having your own Cyclone drop. Because what happens, this might get a little more advanced in terms of micro. But if your opponent drops Cyclones, they're going to use their lock-on any target. Then if you drop your Cyclones after, you're still going to have the lock-ons and his Cyclones won't. So you have the micro advantage there, right? It does get a little complicated, but that is, you know, usually how it goes. So I think Cyclone drops are pretty awesome defensively anyway. And now here my opponent's gonna scout that I did indeed fake him out a little bit. I've only made one Marauder and nothing else. That SCV is probably going to die, but at the cost of one Reaper, that is really not so bad. Actually, I didn't even notice that I did this. I mean, obviously, when I was playing this game, I did, but I was gonna make the third gas, but I stopped making it because I wanted to have my third command center a little earlier. And I think that was a pretty good decision, because if you look at my gas now, I definitely didn't need that early. Now, I decided to go for a tank and a Viking behind it. The Viking is a little unusual, but I just felt like something like this was gonna happen. Like, I was just talking about how good Cyclone drops are. I was just pretty sure that he was gonna drop me in some capacity as well. And I just wanted to make sure to not get absolutely obliterated by it, because I sent my only 3 units across the map, right, while I was busy getting up Bravers and stuff. So I decided to make one Viking first. Now, sadly, I did lose that medevac. I probably should have been able to snipe it, honestly, if my unit movement was a little bit better, but I couldn't keep track of it, so that's unfortunate. That could have been a very, very good start here, but as it is, I think we're just going to be playing a relatively even game from now on. Now, normally what you would do in this situation to go for a normal follow-up is you lift away the starport, right? After making the Raven or after making Interference Matrix, whatever you prefer. Then you put the barracks on the tech lab, you research Stim, you get 2 more barracks, make an additional reactor with the starport, and then you have 5 Marine, 1 tank production. And then the most meta build now is to go into medevacs. You can also go into Vikings, but I mean, you know, the good Terrans that make the meta these days probably know better than me what to do. But that is not what I'm going to do at all. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a second factory, and I'm even going to make a second starport later on, and I'm literally going to do a crazy push in just a couple of minutes with mass tank Viking and pretty much nothing else. I mean, these are the kind of crazy pushes that I like to do. It is not always the strongest idea, to be honest, but it is just freaking fun. Like, your opponent's gonna have, I don't know, like 3 tanks and a bunch of Marines, or you're gonna have like 7 tanks and 10 Vikings, and that's all you have. You're gonna leave your entire base wide open. If a drop gets into your base, you will not have any fast units to respond to it. But I just think it makes for a very awesome push. Now, this medevac, this is actually an underutilized move, by the way. I just want to shout this move out real quick. I didn't put any units in this medevac, because the medevac is a freaking amazing scout. Like, look how easily I just scouted this entire base without having to use a scan. And this medevac is not even necessarily something I need because I'm not going to be making bio units. And because of the boost, it looks like this medevac is even getting away. Unless there's like another cyclone drop or whatever that's going to catch that. But that is a very underused move. At some point, you don't want to take the risk anymore to drop, right? If you're going to drop, it's always going to feel risky. He did find it. I don't think he found it because he had another Viking. I just think I stopped moving my medevac more likely. So here we go, 7 minutes. I think this is crazy impressive, by the way. Check this out. I went for the fake proxy marauder, right? It got scouted. And despite that, we have 116 supply at a little bit past 7 minutes. Like, this build actually seems pretty freaking efficient somehow. Now, sadly, I didn't save my scan, so I don't know where his army is. He is right there. He's going to stim into me. This looked very dangerous, but I had the Ravens and he didn't. So I could interference matrix 2 of the 3 tanks that were sieged in the back. I probably could have gotten all of them, but I missed out a little bit there. But I have the landed Vikings. The Marines got obliterated, and now we took an amazing fight there. And what was so cool about this is that I don't think that fight could have started much worse, could it have? Like, I wasn't sieged. I didn't get all of the matrices off. Like, that fight actually looked like we were going to get absolutely fricked, and we still came out on top there. So, is this build just secretly freaking strong that we are doing? Like, did the fake out work extremely well? And is the follow-up also amazing? I mean, keep in mind, guys, this is an absolute mastermind of TVT we're playing against. And still, this looks very, very strong. And I was definitely excited to try this more as of this moment. But then we still have to focus out on closing out the game. This is just one tip I'm going to give you for this situation is exactly stuff like that. Like the army you have here, it is not good at responding to stuff. You can't really, you know, unsiege your tanks and follow a bio army to react to a kind of push like that. So you need to be very, very careful. If I would unsiege my army at the front once, I could get killed by the Marine SCVs around, and then all of a sudden my third base might die, or I could never land it again, and then we're in trouble. So you want to be really careful. You want to siege forward as slowly as possible. This tank was pretty brave, but I just saw an opportunity there and I decided to grab it. Now these Vikings are going to have to be landed 100%, by the way. These Vikings are going to absolutely annihilate SCVs. Tanks have to focus fire on the Marines. As you can see, those SCVs are absolutely disappearing right now. This CC is barely going to stay alive. I sent a couple of Vikings there that were able to kill the medevacs in the frontal attack. And now I do have to fly away with this army. My tank is going to die pretty fast, but if I can survive with these Vikings, that's going to be pretty nice. The reason why I have to fly away with these Vikings exactly, you could see it on the minimap if you were paying attention. And their Marines were coming from the bottom as well. So if I kept flying those Vikings towards my base, those all would have died instantly, and that would have been pretty sketch. Now, don't mind me, guys. You know, I'm in the middle of killing all of his SCVs, killed his third commander, but let me just go ahead and take my fourth base, because why not? Because that's how psychotic I am. Now, at this point, realistically, there's only one thing I have to do, and that is just survive the immediate attack. I don't know exactly what the worker count is. Looking at my mineral line, my worker count is probably about 70 to 75, and my opponent's going to be on, I don't know, 30 or something. So really, all I have to do is survive. And there's only one thing I have to do to survive, and that's make sure that I don't lose all of my tanks right away. So keeping the Vikings next to the tanks is a very good idea. Making turrets so drops in the main are going to be more painful is a good idea. It might even seem like I'm making a ridiculous amount of turrets, because I'm pretty sure I just built like 9 split over 3 bases as I'm taking my 4th base as well. But I think that, you know, the moment his next attack fails or his next drop fails, we should just be able to win this game immediately. Wouldn't even be surprised if it caused a GG right away. So here you can see those turrets kill 2 medevacs instantly. All the Vikings are going to take care of the rest. The tanks are going to obliterate the army in time. Not even going to lose those tanks, I believe. Just one of them. He scans the third base, sees it's fully saturated, and that's how we win game 1 against one of the best Terran players in the world. Game number 2 is going to be on side Delta, and on this game I'm going to execute the cheese build that I had planned for a TVT against Clem, actually. And the reason why, that sounds very vague, because I don't usually play these tournaments, so why would I have it for Clem? It's just, sometimes, if you play a lot of StarCraft, especially if you've competed in the past, sometimes these things just go through your head. Like, if I would play against Cyril, what build would I do, or stuff like that. And I had one cheese that worked really well, in particular against Clem throughout the years. And I really wanted to use that build against him, because I thought it might work again, but I'm going to use it here against the Ryong. Now, if I would explain to you guys the difference between playing against European and Korean Terrans, like back in the day, Korean Terrans were definitely way better. These days, it's not so much the case, with Clem being on top, as well as Oliveira, who is not European, but he's Chinese, so also not Korean, of course. That European Terrans, they are mostly very good mechanically and very good at the micro, and Korean Terrans tend to be extremely good strategically when it comes to TVT. Like, especially when the Korean Terrans were super dominant, it was so hard to go up against because I feel like they always knew what move to make. They always had the freshest builds on the block kind of thing, you know? So this kind of builds with proxies and stuff are actually not what I would usually play against Korean Terrans. Against Korean Terrans, I would typically prefer engaging, and I know it sounds kind of crazy, right? But I prefer engaging in a more straight up fight. Like, if you guys remember I'm not quite sure. I think it was also a cheese episode of cheesing the ESL Cup. I played against Björn, and I also had really good games against him just by playing macro mech pretty much. And when I beat him in Valencia, it was pretty much the same thing. But here, we are going to have to take another approach, and the build I'm going to go for, I'm not quite sure if you guys can tell already, probably is going to be the proxy starport. This build is not necessarily the best on this map. Usually the map I prefer to this is just any map that doesn't have a ramp going into the natural, but sometimes you can't really, 100% control what the order of the maps is, right? I just felt like doing that build in the last game. I would prefer to do this build on a smaller map with no ramp, but here we are. It is what it is. I want to use it. I want to take him down 2-0, so that's what we're going to do. So the exact build is that we are going to go for one Reaper, then a Reactor, make Mass Reaper Hellion, and just run them into the natural as we're sieging a Liberator into the main. The reason why this is hard to defend is because people typically follow the main build order that they have for TVT, because in TVT, it's really hard to be 100% solid. If you guys have ever played TVT, you will definitely notice that sometimes you play this build and then you lose to X, and then you play a build that counters that, but you lose to Y, and it just always kind of goes like that. So for the most part, people play the build that they think is the best overall, or the build that they just feel like attacking with. But if they're going to be on the defensive, they will choose one build, which could, for example, be one Reaper and then 2 Cyclones and then a tank. If they think that that is the most safe against all possible forms of aggression, they will play something like that, right? So let's say we're going to go up against 2 Cyclones. If the Liberator forces 1 Cyclone to the main instantly, then the front is going to be exposed. If they don't send anything to the main, the Liberator is going to deny the entire main mineral line mining forever. So it's a tough choice for them to make. Yeah, the hard part for me really is just this ramp, because I'm going to have to walk up this ramp, and I might take... Okay, here we were lucky, but you might take a lot of damage right away. So here we can already tell that he went for 2 Cyclones instantly, which is not something I'm happy to see. Luckily for me, I did only lose 1 unit there, which is really not so bad, but that was obviously already a little bit of an annoying start, losing 1 unit for just 1 SCV. And it seems like he got the Cyclone so fast. He has a medevac out there that might be... Exactly, yeah, that's just a spotting medevac. He didn't realize the Liberator was there. We are once again gonna only lose 1 unit, so this really could have been a lot worse. At this point, I'm gonna have to start my command center. Gonna have to re-siege that one. And this is when I realized that we were most likely gonna be in big trouble. I saw the Cyclone in the main. I was like, all right, our opponent sent 1 Cyclone to the main. Turns out that he went for a very special build where he made 3 Cyclones, or maybe even more for all we know. And I think 3 Cyclones, especially with the medevac, should just be enough to, yeah, counter everything we have. So what I decided to do was go for a little bit of a crazy strategy, make another Liberator, which is extremely unusual, but try to kind of get control of the game that way. It's possible that my opponent would not go for a Viking because he saw that the Liberators were already under control. That is very possible. Now, I would love to kill that, but I don't think... Oh, I'm actually going to be able to kill the Cyclone. Look at that. That is beautiful. I was going to say, I don't think I'm going to kill that. But he did, sadly, for us, go for a Viking, and that's going to be hard for us to deal with. So he's chasing down this 1 Liberator that might give us another opportunity to go into the natural. Yeah, so far, he's just defended the Reapers and Hellions well enough for us to do anything, which is very painful. Liberator's going to siege, might get 1 hit off on the Cyclone. Now, notice how he moved the Cyclone, and we're finally going to be able to get in here. We're going to kill a lot of Marines here, which is absolutely fantastic. That Cyclone is too covered by SCV, so we're barely not going to be able to kill it. That Cyclone does fall, which is very, very nice for us. Now, if the Viking wasn't here, I would love to try and do a little more aggression, but sadly for us, we're not going to be able to do that. And now, we're kind of in a weird spot, because it looked like that was going to be an absolute disaster. I still think it was not that good. This must be funny for you guys to watch after the first game, because the first game we did a cheese with Proxy Marauder, fake proxy, did literally nothing, and I was like, oh, we're in a pretty good spot here. This game, we killed a lot of stuff, and I'm like, oh, we're pretty much screwed. It's because our command center with this build is so freaking late, you really have to mess up your opponent here. So here, Yeah, realistically, I thought we were like at least 30% behind or something. I know it sounds extreme, but yeah, it really does feel that bad to me. Now, I decided to go for a similar follow-up where I'm just going to make a lot of Vikings at home and try to get like one of those big Viking tank pushes going again. Especially when you're behind in a TVT, what most of them tend to do is just go for the first push that they can. Whether that's with a bunch of Ravens or whether that is with a bunch of Vikings or 3 tanks or whatever, you know. Usually they try to find the first good moment for a push and they will take it right away. I decided to make up for my disadvantage by going with the 5 Reapers. Just so you guys know, Reapers are pretty much useless later on into the game, so it's actually not that crazy to try and even trade them for just 5 SCVs, even though that's economically not, you know, the perfect trade. Here, it didn't work out at all. I think we got 1 SCV for 5 Reapers, and that's going to put us even further behind. This is always the tough thing about playing these games from behind. It's like you want to play desperate because you have to, but very often desperation moves don't work out, so it just looks silly. It's like, why did you say those Reapers? Well, I had to freaking do something. But obviously, I rather would have kept them alive than trading them for 1 SCV, but I had to take the risk there, you know. Now, I'm going to try to push out again with my Liberators. I, however, did not expect him to be over here already. His army looks pretty freaking massive. I only has 1 tank. He has the Interference Matrix. I'm going to siege my Liberator, but he has 2 auto turrets, and that's going to be it for game number 2. The final game in the series is going to be on El Saini. Now, once again, we are going to the rubber match here. First series was 1-1. The second series is 1-1 as well. Now, this game, I had you guys probably can guess already what I'm gonna do. In the last series, I did the same strategy twice, even when it failed. This time, I'm gonna do it slightly different because my strategy failed in a different way. I'm gonna try to go for the Proxy Marauder build again, but this time, I wanna actually make the freaking Marauder attack, right? And I feel like that's gonna be a very good mind game, because if you judge how that first game went, keep in mind, we won that game pretty convincingly after the opponent scouted my Marauder build, and my build looked... I mean, I was as surprised as he probably was, but my build looked like a legit build despite not doing anything besides building a barracks in Tokyo and making 1 Marauder without concussive shells and flying the barracks back. Like, that's quite literally all I did. And suddenly, or for some reason, the build was just freaking good. So this game, I actually would love to get the Marauder with concussive shells up. Now, this is a very tricky place to proxy a barracks. This is the kind of place where it could be found if the opponent takes a specific path with the scout back from their base, or back from scouting my base rather, but you don't actually scout it if you right-click your opponent's base. So if his SCV just goes directly to my base, he would not see this. Same with the Reaper. The Reaper might actually see this, just depending on how the angle of the Reaper jump-in spot is. So it's not a 100% safe spot, but it's just going to be, you know, causing a little bit of confusion early on more than anything else. I'm also going to build my factory a little bit further back. I definitely think this build could use some work, like not talking about the strategy, but the build itself, because if you keep paying attention, you'll see that the money is just not flowing in properly, right? Like, I couldn't afford my Marauder barely, I couldn't afford my SCV barely, and then I had to wait for concussive shells as well. Now, his SCV might scout me on the way back, just depending on the path he took. Same with the Reaper. And there we go. Okay, so this SCV scout tells me, this is not important by the way, but it just tells me the way he plays, is that he always checks the third base for a fake proxy. Because if he would have clicked the SCV back directly, he wouldn't have seen it, so it means he checked the same location with the SCV he checked in game number 1 for the proxy. Here we go. I'm gonna go across with my Marauder. And this is the part that he might not expect just based off of game number 1. And he is indeed building a command center over here. This is going to be pretty hard for him to keep alive because, I mean, Marauders are just really good early on until you get a unit that can kill them, which, I mean, a bunch of SEVs can kill it for sure. A bunch of Reapers could also kill it, but that's going to be tricky once more Marauders start hitting the field. So here we go. He decides to pull the SCVs, but now the second Marauder shows up, and this time I actually did get the slow upgrade, and he's not going to be happy seeing that because he's losing 2 SCVs, he lost a lot of mining time, and he had to cancel the command center, and now we're going to follow it up by building our own. So this crazy build, guys, especially with the mind games, worked out already. I'm going to build my own command center now, and I feel like this is going to put us at a pretty small advantage, but it's definitely there. And now you guys are going to witness the second part of this genius strategy, which is that we're actually going to attack up his ramp. He's not going to expect this because all he's seen so far is just 2 Marauders chilling and you know, that's quite literally it. But I'm actually going to walk up his ramp. If you guys have never seen Marauders against a Cyclone, for example, it kills it instantly. So here we go. There's a Cyclone there. I'm going to kill it quite literally instantly. It dies in just 2 volleys, and now with some good micro on those Marauders, I should be able to keep all of them alive while killing his units right away. Now he has another Cyclone. He did fail that lock-on briefly, and now I'm gonna do something crazy and die for the Cyclone. Notice how his lock-on went for my Cyclone, not the Marauders. So the Marauders are gonna do a crazy amount of damage. We're killing a lot of units over here, and now I'm gonna make one of the funniest mistakes I've seen in a while, which is that I shot my own freaking Cyclone. And this is what I was actually laughing out loud, because I didn't just damage my own unit, I also freaking slowed it. I was literally like, here it is, 1 HP and it's slow. Please kill it with your SCVs. That was just a pretty hilarious mistake, honestly. Those are the best kind of mistakes, because I don't think the impact on the game was that big. Like, those units were all very low HP. They would have died right away. Maybe I killed one more SCV, but at the same time, it is pretty freaking hilarious. So now we're in a position where I feel very, very comfortable. My opponent lost 2 Cyclones, which means he's not going to have that many units to attack me with. I was able to make my 3rd command center already. I got my Ravens on the way, and this is pretty much the ideal situation. And now this is also going to be a really good test, because we are going to see if this build also follows up as well as it did in game 1 after making those extra units. Like, keep in mind, you might feel like this game is going way smoother than the first game, because, I mean, I did get scouted, but the attack still worked absolutely fantastically, right? But at the same time, I did spend a significant amount of resources on making those 2 extra Marauders, as well as the Concussion Shell upgrade actually finishing, so that could have a pretty significant impact, right? Like, how many resources that exactly? I want to say that it is 100 gas and 250 minerals that I spent extra. So that is not nothing. That is actually quite expensive. Like, notice how, for example, I didn't have a lot of units ready for the first drop at all, right? That's because I did trade out all of my units on the other side of the map instead of keeping my Cyclone and my Marauder alive. I was going to say awake for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe the Marauder just seems a little sleepy when it slows things. I'm not quite sure. But all right, I'm just trying to split my units as well as possible. This is a really big tip I'm going to give you guys for TVT, is that if you ever want to play a very good TVT, the perfect TVT, you want to make sure to never have to... This is exactly what I was talking about. This is a mistake here by me. You want to make sure that you never have to respond to things. Like, you always want to be in position beforehand. TVT is a very low work account matchup, because you typically go for tech before expanding, right? And if you have to pull your workers away for even 10 seconds, you lose 3 workers here and there, it's always a pretty big deal. And here, a Liberator is honestly the last unit I expected. That's why I wasn't prepared. But I still should have been, because now I lost a little bit of mining time. I think I lost 1 or 2 SCVs or something like that. And that definitely does matter. So in TVT, if you want to play the perfect TVT, you always want to be in position beforehand. Make sure you siege a tank that covers your entire mineral line. Make sure you have a Cyclone in position. For example, in the angle this Liberator came in. I think I didn't put it there because he did a good job of distracting me with his drop. That's a very high level move. But ideally, my Cyclone would have been in the bottom right of my main base and my Marines in the top left of my natural base, so I could have covered every entry. Now notice how the build has been going so far. My 3rd base is very fast. I already have 2 factories. I wasn't able to afford the 2nd starport yet, which could end up being a problem, mostly for the reason that I need air control to win out with a tank push. If you're gonna do a tank push without anti-air, that's actually gonna be a little sad, because you can't really make use of your heavy tank out. Like, you need the air coverage so you can actually push forward safely. Now, my opponent, Ryung, he is a TVT master. I've said it multiple times, but I know exactly what that means. What that means is that he is extremely good at positioning his units. Like, notice how he's standing out here. He has a smaller army, but he was pre-sieged already. Here, okay, that was really unfortunate. I thought I would barely have enough space to be able to get through there, but instead I lost 1 tank. And now I'm pretty sure he unsieged his army already to move away, so I should be able to move back safely, but I didn't want to take the risk, so I'm gonna walk around with my units still. And this was a very good sequence from the opponent here in particular. I don't think I made a huge mistake here. I could have played a little safer. I was just very eager to go for an attack, but it was mostly just my opponent, going for perfect play there. His things were in literally the perfect position. Couldn't walk through the middle and barely didn't have enough space to walk to the left side, and his Liberator got a lot of damage done, so that is a fantastic, minute for him, maybe a minute and a half or so. But our army is still pretty big. This build also seems to translate pretty well after making taking the extra Marauders. I do actually like it more after the fake, by the way. If you guys want to differentiate between when you go for this push and when you don't, I would rather do this push after the fake because I felt like I really wasn't able to afford my second starport that fast. It was just like slightly delayed, and I don't like how many Vikings I have. I really would like to have more. Now, he keeps annoyingly being on top of positioning his units. I felt like a couple times, okay, he's going to be on the left now, I can walk here or stuff like that, but he keeps just being on top of positioning his units, which is really annoying. Here he made another amazing move by unsieging his tanks in the perfect moment. He unsieged them as I dropped the Matrix, so now he was actually able to walk them away to safety. Sadly for him, I had more Matrixes, so now I'm going to walk in. I'm going to land the Vikings as well. Vikings are amazing in anything that's armored on the ground, so they're really good against tanks. They kill them super fast as well as other Vikings, and now we're going to be able to push through. I have 6 tanks left, and I want to guess he has 1 that's probably just coming out of his factory. At some point I'm going to make a 4 CC behind it, and this follow-up just continues to look very, very strong. Now in this game, obviously, we had a really good start. Our opponent made some amazing moves, but the start was still amazing for us. So that lead obviously going to carry through, even though my opponent owns me a little bit. Now here, this is what I mean about the Viking wars. Like, I barely just don't have enough Vikings to kill his air control, and that's going to make it way harder to push through, which is exactly what you want to do with this build. Now, luckily for me, I know that I have 5 gajillion tanks against what is most likely to be 1, so I'm just going to go ahead and siege forward. This is a very risky move, but I really just want to make sure I break him right away. He has a lot of Vikings, and he's going to drop Marauders on top of my tanks. I have to unsiege my tanks so I can actually shoot the units, and it looks like we're barely going to be able to kill those units without losing a tank. The Marauders and SCVs are really good against this, so I'm trying to micro the low HP tanks back, and I think I'm going to be able to survive with just a couple of these. If I'm lucky, I can survive with that red one as well. I'm just going to make sure to siege them up instantly. I also have more Vikings that I can land. I got more tanks coming in. Need to make sure that I target the Marauders because those do a crazy amount of damage. This is ending up being a pretty insane battle, but now I have a couple too many tank siege in front of his base. I'm also able to make more factories and armies at home. And GG is called, and we beat one of the absolute best TVT player in the world with the freaking Marauder build. The third series is going to be against MaxPax. That's right, the quite literal highest rated Protoss player on Earth. This is going to be, yeah, saying it's going to be a tough match is an understatement. However, I did have a pretty cool idea, and I can tell you guys this is going to be one of the coolest games that you have seen in a long time. So buckle up. So the idea that I had was, initially, I wanted to do some kind of proxy marine SCV pool. I did once beat MaxPax in one of these cheese challenges, and I think one game I did beat him with the marine SCV pool, and the other game I think I did some ridiculous... What did I actually do? I think it was a proxy Marauder build, actually. Proxy Reaper into proxy Marauder. But this game, I had an even crazier idea. What I want to do this game is I want to go for my best version of a Thor all-in. And I know you're thinking, like, Mark, why on earth would you play a Thor all-in against someone this good, against the highest rated Protoss player on Earth? It's because I actually kind of believe in it. I have one specific build that I think if you pull it out sometimes, it's actually very strong, especially against particular build orders. So what I'm going to open with here, if you guys are wondering what this SCV is doing so early, is I'm going to go for an Engineering Bay block. Engineering Bay blocks are not super common anymore. They were like ultra hyped like a couple of years ago, like every Terran was doing it every game. But what I think about Engineering Bay blocks is if your opponent scouts for it early enough, like sometimes what Protoss players will do is they'll send a probe down like 1 or 2 supply early. If they just scouted that early, I feel like it's really just not that good. They just attack your SCV right away, they pull a couple more probes, the eBay dies instantly, and you've wasted a lot of mining time, the money on the eBay, and they just built the Nexus. In this case, he did not do that. He did not expect the eBay block, which is really nice for us. Which means he just sent his probe to take the third Nexus on the left side. At least that's what it looked like his probe was doing. And then I'm gonna proxy the factory after. And this very specifically, I think, is the best Thor all-in you can do. I think I saw the Muslim actually do it at some point. StarCraft 2 player who's now an AoE 4 player. You guys probably know him from his stream or something. I saw him do it at some point, and I actually thought it was pretty cool. So I tried optimizing his build a little bit, and I ended up really liking that build. And now we're going to be doing it against the best Protoss player in the world. Or maybe after the last World Championship, a lot of people would consider him the second best Protoss player in the world, which I think is very reasonable after Hero's legendary performance. But that is a debate for another time. So I'm not quite sure how I want to execute this yet. Usually you just pull a bunch of SCVs, you make a Thor and a medevac. Jumping into the main here was actually a little psychotic by me because I had no idea what his building positioning was like and if he had another unit up there or not. So this was quite risky, but it ended up paying off because I'm buying himself or losing him some more mining time. I was going to say buying myself some mining time, but that sounds a little weird. So the armory goes down before the starport. This Reaper might be able to survive. It does look like it's gonna survive. I need to be very sure I don't actually lead him to my factory, by the way. Like, you could have thought, wait, it was way safer to go up there. Yeah, I do not want him to see my factory no matter what. I would rather lose 4 Marines with the snap of a finger than let him see that factory, honestly, at this point. Like, the Thor by itself is so freaking strong. Now, this might get a little crazy because he has the battery up, which means that he could send his adepts across the map. This Reaper did not have a good time trying to get up that ramp, unfortunately for me. And here I am actually going to lose a couple of Marines. That is pretty low HP. Right now, looking at this game, I really think maybe I should have sent the Reaper back to try and kill that because every unit makes a pretty big difference, but for some reason I just wanted to keep scouting. That was, I believe, a robotics facility building. And at this point, I was a little unsure. Judging by the timing of that robo, I would almost think that it's going to be Stargate, right? That he went for Phoenixes and then went for the robo, but he actually went for Blink and then the robo. So what I think happened here is that he was maybe afraid of something cloaked. I think that makes the most sense. So the adept is going to get into the base, it's going to die instantly, and he doesn't get to see the SCV. So in the end, that looked very hectic. Don't really have much to worry about, so that is quite nice. Now, I really do need it sucks that my SCVs were delayed, because I need them to arrive instantly. And here we go with Mr. Thor. Mr. Thor is going to kill a Stalker instantly. A Thor perfectly 3 shots a Stalker, by the way. And that's why it's such a good freaking build. Look at the damage on that Thor. Like, it's so freaking absurd. I decided to go into the main base here. Probably can kill another Stalker right away. Like, Thors are... Look at that. That is just beautiful, isn't it? Now, I arrived over here. The reason why I'm gonna go back here, you guys might wonder why didn't you just kill the pylon, is because this robo is building a freaking immortal. And you guys can imagine that immortals are not something I want to see when I have a Thor. So I'm going to be able to take down this pylon. And if I can manage to shut down this robo, there's only one big worry for me left, and that is just going to be Blink Stalkers. Like, if you're going to go up against a really good Protoss that uses Blink Stalkers to the maximum potential, you'll really know why I get scared of them, because if I ever load my units up into the medevac, it's going to be quite easy for him to snipe it because his micro is really good. Stalkers are perfect for that. And you see, I was tempted to go into the main base, but then he brought his probes back. I think maybe the best possible move I could have. I have one medevac AFK there, and I really needed that medevac, honestly. If I had that medevac right now, I would have flown both my Thors into his main base and snipe his pylons. I think that would have been the best possible play. Sadly, I wasn't able to do that. He might even recall his army at some point, so I have to be extremely careful for that. Right now, my Thor is still at the front, the hard chilling, and there we go. He's gonna go for the recall now. And honestly, I wasn't really happy with that. I do manage to save the Thor from damage, but the reason why I'm not happy is because I thought with shutting the robo down, he would not have that many Stalkers. I was hoping it would be like 6 or 7, but he already has 10 Stalkers, and I kind of feel like it's even 12 Stalkers perhaps. I kind of feel like it's too many Stalkers already. I don't really feel like I can break this anymore, and that sucks for me because I really thought we would have a chance to break him instantly. Instead, I'm gonna have to play the slower game a little bit here. I do hope that my SCVs keep freaking repairing those stores because that's the main reason that they're there for, so please keep freaking doing that. I'm gonna drop some more mules. My economy is very small, keep that in mind. My economy is smaller than his. And now we're in a pretty funny situation. He has a bunch of Stalkers on each side and I can't really do much, but I do have to do something. Like, there's no way I can play the macro game from here. So I'm gonna do something crazy and just drop my Thors on top of his Stalkers, try to see if I can kill anything here. He has a bunch of Stalkers in the backline. And that is on one hand good for him, but it does allow me to get in here a little bit more comfortably. Now, let's see. I have 2 Thors. I have about 6 SCVs, I believe, and I have about 8 Marines. Now, let's see. What you want to do with these Thors is you usually just want to hold position them. I'm going to kill a couple more Stalkers there, which is nice. I used the battery overcharge, which maybe is not the best time for that battery overcharge ever. He's going to try to snipe my medevac, just make sure it doesn't happen. He is going to lose. Oh, he does actually kill it, so well done by him. I guess he's a little better than me. He is gonna lose the cybernetic score pretty soon, I think. I'm not sure if it matters because honestly at this point Zealots are also gonna be freaking good and freaking annoying. He's gonna pull the workers right away, and I'm just gonna have to make sure to micro my Thors to the maximum potential, which is gonna be very hard. I do have another Thor over there. I should be able to save it barely. The SCVs cannot repair the Thors anymore on the low ground. And here it looks like those couple Stalkers are indeed going to do the difference. I will be able to repair those couple Thors, but I feel like at this point with all the eco I've lost, I'm not quite sure if I can recover from this no more. That blink forward I didn't actually like. I felt like he could have done a lot better than that, so that is a rare mistake from a really high-level Protoss player. But sadly, before I could totally outdamage the battery overcharges, one Thor is not going to be able to outdamage the battery overcharge. I'm going to get in here. I'm trying to target the battery right away. I did actually stop targeting the battery. Now I realize my mistake there. I don't think it would have made a massive difference because there were 5 Stalkers, and that is going to be it. We were incredibly close to beating the highest ranked Protoss player in the world with a Thor rush, but we barely didn't manage to. Unfortunately, the second game of this series was quite disappointing. I went for an absolutely crazy build trying to play 2x Reaper with a proxied barracks against Protoss, which no one ever does, thinking I might be able to kill the first adept and then follow it up with a 5x timing. What happened, however, is that the second adept finished way faster than anticipated. The Reaper wall combined with good micro on his early adept shut down my harassment instantly. When moving across the map, his adepts denied my command center at 99% health, causing me to be horribly supply blocked in an extremely anticlimactic fashion. That is going to be the end of our run. In the end, we played some fantastic games, beating a mid-GM toss with a PF rush, beating one of the best TVT players in the world with pure memes, and almost beating the #1 ranked Protoss with a freaking proxy Thor rush. Thank you all for watching. See you for the next one.